Hello friends, hope you all are doing good. So today I come with a new sessions for the config maps. This is also a very important topics for the CKA exam, and they will not ask you a direct question on the config map. There is something related with the pod, there is something related with the deployments, replica sets. So they will use two or three objects with the config maps to just complete the question part. So what is the config map we are going to look into these particular sessions? It's basically used to store non-confidential data centrally. So not a confidential but a non-confidential that if anyone can have a look, there is no confidentially data behind it. So that is the open for the public. So these types of informations we store it in central locations from where the different types of objects can access it. So this is the overview session for this, and what we are going to cover in this particular sessions, we are going to discuss about this in particular slide. So what is the config map? We are going to look into it, how we to create it, and how to use the config map in the pod creation. So we are taking a single example of the pod creations, how we can use the config map, and definitely some tips and tricks if it's involved with the CKA exams. We will discuss it as well in these particular sessions. So now coming back to the config map, what is it and why it required? So a config map is an API object, like we have the pod, replica set objects. So all are the API objects used to store a non-confidential data that I already discussed. For confidential data, you can use the secret objects. Now for the non-confidential data is a key pair centrally. So there is some key and have the value. So key value pair, we are storing it as a centrally, and that we can refer to with the objects. Like we have the, suppose we have an environment where we are currently working in the development environment where we required a memory of only 2 GB. 2 GB memory is required for the development environment. But when the same pod will go to the productions, the memory will be might be the 8 GB. So you don't need to require to change the manifest file for the pod. There is only required to change the config map, which is treated as an environment variables. So the environment variable is stored centrally, and you can change it accordingly. So in the environment variables, the variable configurations that you placed centrally is referred by the objects, and so you don't need to change the object manifest. You have to do a modification in the environment variables to just bring into just reflect those changes. So pods can consume config map as environment variables, as I'm already mentioned, command line argument, or as a configurations map as a volume. So you can store it in a particular locations. You mount with a volume, and then you can refer the particular path, the mount path, so that when the pod gets created, the container is get created, you have all the informations, whatever is stored in the file, literal values or directory, that informations you can store in a local container, and you can use it accordingly. So whenever there is a change in the environment variable, the changes will reflect into that particular container. I am going to demonstrate in the lab session this particular point as well. So a config map allow you to decouple the environment, a specific environment. Decoupling means currently you are working in the development environment, and after the finishing all the development, you can move that particular thing into production. So you don't have to change in the manifest file. You have to change in the environment variable for the production. So that's the same manifest file for the object will run for the development environment also, and for the production environment also. Or you have within the between there is a staging environment, the UAT environment, the pre-production environment, whatever you can say in your current working environment. So you can say that the same manifest file will work for all, because you have the different environment variables set up for that particular functionalities, or you can say the environment properties. So config map does not provide secrecy or encryption. So as I told you that this is in the non-confidential, this is the used to store the non-confidential data, not the confidential ones. That is open for the public, means any user can see the property. Okay, the memory required is this much. This is the URL of the tab. This is the URL of the production. This is the URL of the UAT, whatever it is. So if the data you want to store as a confidential, use secret rather than the config map. Definitely, if you have to hide some or you want to use some credentials types of thing like the password for the services, password for the database, any types that is you want to keep as a confidentials, you can use the secrets, not the config map, or use additional third party. The third party tools like the you can use the AWS secrets things. You can use the Terraform related things. There are several secrets services provided by the several cloud provider, and you can use it. So that tools will keep your data private. So this is something you can consider as a use case. So we have a development environment and the production environment. Like even for the app dot environment, I provided this is the first configuration map. This is the second configuration map. So whenever the pod get deployed, it's identified that in which environment it's going to deploy. So if it's identified as a development, this particular environment variable come into the picture for to replicate all these things. And when the pod get deployed into the production environment, when the app.environment comes as a prod, it will set the memory and the URL accordingly. So you can see that we are not changing anything in the manifest file. We are changing in the environment file, environment variable file that is considered and that is placed on the remote locations and in the central locations where from where we can fetch that particular environment related values. So how we can define a config map? So you can write a command like a kubectl create config map, or you can write it as a kubectl create CM. C for config and M for map is the short names, and then we have the name of the config map, and then data source. Data source may be the from literal values, from file, from directories, whatever it is. So you can define through the literal value. If you are not confirmed about you, or you have the very less property that you need to define, or if you have several properties like more than 100 properties, just write in a file and just use it as a config map. So there, and whenever you want to change it, you just need to change into the config map file, and the same changes will reflect for the particular pods if they have the linking or they are utilizing that particular config maps. So this is the example to use the config maps in the pod. So you can see the API version VI that is we are using for the pod, and the metadata is my pod. The name of this is the name of the pod. You already know that. If you don't have any information regarding how to create the pod, you can refer my previous sessions on the pods, the simple pod sessions that I already uploaded on the YouTube. And the container is this is the name of the container, my pod. You have to be very specific about the alignment of the text, otherwise it will complain. The mount value, this is what we are talking about in the few minutes back, that you can allocate, means you can do a bounding types of things, the mounting of path. So this is the path of the container where you have all the environment related values will be saved from the my config map. So this is a volume which utilizing the config maps, and this is going to be placed on a particular location. So in the hands-on, we are going to clear all these things, how we will create a pod and how to utilize that particular config maps that we already created. So we are going to look into this. So this is some commands that I listed here. The kubectl create a config map. The name of the config map is my config map. This is the my config map, because we are going to use it. From literals, if you don't have many values, you can define it in the similar way, like app.memory is equal to 1000, and it will get saved into this particular locations when the pods container gets created. Cubes CTL create config map my config map from file, the app.property. So this is the file where we have more than 100 or you can say the many fields that you want to you set the values like key and the values that you want to utilize as a config map to, so that your container will utilize that particular things when it's get created. So now I'm jumping to the lab session to understand the config map concepts in a better way. So you have the more clarity when you see the things in a lab. So I'm jumping to the lab sessions for demonstration. So we are going to create a config map using the literal values. The command will be kubectl create, and create cm, the shortcode I am using for config map, my config map. And here I am going to use the from literal values, from literal. Okay, so here we have the values like suppose I'm just mentioning the memory properties here, app dot memory. The value will be suppose 1000. Okay, so the config map is created, and we are going to identify it as well by executing the YAML command. So I'm just going to execute the command for this. The command will be kubectl get config map, or you can see for the property, so you can understand that okay, what the config map is created. My config map is already created. Now I'm going to use that my config map. Okay, O of YAML. So here you have all the things like whatever the environment variable we set up is listed here. You can say, verify it that app.memory is now 1000. Okay, this is fine. So now I'm going to clear the screen. Okay, so now I'm going to create a pod using that particular config map. So I'm creating one pod.yaml because I have to utilize that config map. So I just write it some definitions file, or you can find it in the Kubernetes documentation as well. So I'm inserting this here. Okay, it's 2 times. Let me escape. Let me go to the top of this and find it. Okay, so now I'm going to insert one more time. Okay, so these all things you are already familiar with, and I'm creating a simple pod using the nginx image, and here we have a volume mount. The mount of the volume is my cm, the config map volume. The locations will be it is in the etc folder, and the name of the tag is my volume. And here we are using the my config map that I already created. So I'm just saving it. Now I'm going to apply kubectl apply. The file name that I am going to mention is the pod.yaml, and this will create a pod. If all the things goes well, the pod will be in the running state. Okay, so pod is already created. Now we have to look into the pod status. Kubectl get pod. So you can see that the pod my pod dot that's cm, the config map is already in the container creating a state. So we have to wait for some times to have the status in the running. Then we will see the definitions, the descriptions for that particular pod that is created. Okay, it's in the running state. kubectl describe pod, my pod. So here you can see that it's using the volume, and volume type is currently the cube. It's a config map that it's using. So all the things looks good, but we need to see the etc on the mount path also. So for this we are going to log in into that particular container as well. So let's clear the screen first. kubectl get pod. Okay, kubectl exec it, the name of the pod is my pod, and bash. So I'm currently inside that particular container, and now I'm going to jump onto the etc my volume ls. So here you can find that there is a app.memory, and now we have to get that app.memory. And here we have the value of 1000. So in this case, you can understand that whatever the environment variable we created, the pod have that particular environment variable for further use. So in this way, we are not going to change any the manifest file. We are doing the environment variable change, and the same thing I am going to demonstrate you that I am not deleting that particular environment variable, the config map, and we will recreate the environment variable. We are not going to change in the manifest, change in the manifest file. We are now creating the config map with the same name, but we are not using the literal value. This time we are going to use the from file. We are using the config map from file. So the manifest file is as it is, the pod is in the running state. So now we are going to delete it. Clear the screen first. Now kubectl get config map. kubectl delete config map, my config map. Now I'm going to recreate it cube, but before that I have to create a file. Vi name is as prop, or you can say the name of the file is app.properties. Okay, and now I'm going to paste some of the content that I already copied it. I'm going to paste it here. So you can see the environment variable, I set it as a prod. The memory is as a 16,000, and the URL of the prod is the prod environment.url, whatever it is. So I only included 3 properties here. I copied this and save it. Now I'm going to create a config map with the same name. kubectl create config map. The name of the config map is my config map, same because it's already has been using by the pod already. So pod is currently in the running state, and now we are just changing the config map from file, and the name will be app.properties. Okay, perfectly fine. So you can see that it's already has been created, and now we will just do and want to see the changes here, the kubectl get config map, my config map of YAML, just to verify the things. So you can see that all the data from the file has been read, and it's showing all the properties perfectly fine. Now clear the screen. Okay, so now I'm want to see the status of the pod, it's running or not. kubectl get pod, so it's in running state. We want to go inside that particular container. kubectl exec the name of the pod, my pod, and the pass command. So we are inside it. Now we are going to see the ed etc, and the name of the volume is my volume ls. So here you can see that the app.properties file is present here. Because the pod is currently in the running state, we didn't change anything in the manifest file. We changed in the config map, because this is the environment variable. So pod is running and they're reflecting the changes accordingly for the config map changes. So I'm doing the cat on that particular file to see my changes. And here it is. So you have all the changes in the running pod. So this is the advantage of the config map, that the variables is located centrally, and the same changes is reflected as soon as you do a modification in the config map. So for the confidential related things, we have to use the secrets, and in the next session we are going to look into that as well, for the secrets related things, how we can store it, and which types of values is best to store for the secrets, because this is not environment related and the memory related things. We can't store as secrets. There's the things that is related with the confidentiality, like the part of password, the credentials of the database, or anything that you have the to store it as a confidential, so you can store it in secrets. So in the next session we will look into the secrets. If you like my video, please subscribe and click on the bell icon. Very thanks to friends. Thank you.